It's time for your daily dose of all things Chicago sports. This is the Daily Score. Now, here's your host, Mark Grote.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into the Daily Score. We have not in a while discussed the Bears Stadium issue. When last we spoke about this several weeks ago, I think I just reasserted my own stance when there had been some momentum to the possibility that the Bears could still build in the city of Chicago proper, along the lakefront, which is what I have always wanted. I've always understood the potential reasoning for going to Arlington Heights. There's a lot of reasons it makes sense, but in my heart, if you ask me what I want the Bears to stay in the city of Chicago. That's what I've always wanted. I just like the beauty of that stadium, and if you could enhance it somehow, some way, or just having a stadium along the lake. I don't know how beautiful Soldier Field is these days, but that to say, things have gone farther in that direction now. The Bears have confirmed that they have shifted from building the new stadium in Arlington Heights back to the museum campus at Soldier Field. The Bears would put in $2 billion in private money to the publicly owned lakefront stadium. So these possibilities have popped back up. The Bears have been commenting on it. And I should say that as we are recording this, I'm just getting this text in, or this tweet. This is from a statement from Arlington Heights on the Bears turning their focus back to the lakefront. The Bears have confirmed that their continued interest in Arlington Park has not changed. Again, that's from Arlington Heights. This is from Mayor Tom Hayes. Quote, "The village has always acted in good faith and partnership with the Chicago Bears and the school districts throughout this discussion while protecting our community's interests, and we will continue to do so as the process moves ahead." Close quote. Again, that is Mayor Tom Hayes. So as the Bears seem to commit to Chicago, here comes Arlington Heights again. And a person who has been on top of this story and continues to be is Shelby Bremer from NBC5. She is an investigative reporter. She joins us now on the Daily Score. Shelby, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Score. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's the story that never ends, right?
Yeah, it really is amazing. What is your reaction, first of all, to the Bears, saying that they want to build in Chicago? Should we believe them? Is this real, or is Arlington Heights, as I just read, are they still in the running for this thing?
I think this is very real, but I also think it's not a done deal. And so you have to kind of walk that line of believing it, taking them at their word that they want to stay in Chicago. Kevin Warren and Mayor Brandon Johnson have forged a relationship that's very different than the team's relationship with Mayor Johnson's predecessor, right? So I think the Bears do have an interest in staying on the lakefront, staying in Chicago. But at the same time, there's only one place where they own 300 acres, and that's Arlington Heights. And I think that they know from a negotiating standpoint that they're not going to rule anything out just yet. They're going to pursue both options and see which one rises to the top. I think there's an emotional component to staying in the city. Kevin Warren speaks pretty openly about that. But nothing is off the table as of right now.
Let's focus on the city right now, Shelby, and so the $2 billion, that's a lot of dough coming from the Bears side that they would place and make this a part of it. But the normal question then is, what about the public money? How exactly does this get paid for?
Right, exactly. And I think it's really interesting. You see this $2 billion number, but the number you don't see is the total cost. And, you subtract the total cost, you subtract $2 billion from the total cost, and you get how much money that they're expecting somebody else to come up with. And the timing of this is really interesting too. It's just a couple weeks after White Sox chairman Jerry Reinsdorf was in Springfield asking lawmakers for $1 billion for his own stadium. If I'm the Bears, I'm looking at that and thinking, hey, we've had these plans in the works for years, and so Jerry Reinsdorf, I think, kind of got out ahead a little bit of the Bears. And so I think that kind of leads to the timing of today. I think the Bears also are kind of trying to lay the groundwork to get some public support. They released some polling numbers that show people support staying on museum campus. They support staying in the city versus moving to the suburbs. Well, that kind of furthers the narrative that helps them when they then turn around and say to state lawmakers or the city, hey, we need $1, $2, $3 billion more dollars in order to make this work.
You mentioned that poll, and I read that in what you wrote, so I'm just going off of what you said. But you had the poll showing, as you said, 66% approval. Do you feel that? I mean, does that feel accurate to you? I mean, it's a poll, it's scientific, all of that kind of stuff. But does that add up to you, Shelby? I guess is the question.
Well, we didn't see the wording of the questions. We didn't see the specifics of the poll, but, I think the question is how much are people willing to pay for that? So it might be nice to have the Bears stay on the lakefront. People have that emotional tie to keeping the Bears in the city, but then when it comes time to cut the check, how much do they really value that? And that's something that the poll, of course, the Bears are not going to release that part if they even tested that part, right?
Yeah. No, that does make sense. There's a group that you mentioned that I don't know that I've ever come across, but it makes sense. A group called the Preservation Group Friends. Friends
of the Parks.
Well, Friends of the Park. Tell us about that. Why did that come up? What are they? Who are they? And why are they a part of this as well?
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, but years ago, George Lucas tried to build a museum on the lakefront, on museum campus. And Friends of the Parks, they're dedicated to preserving the lakefront, to preserving that public space and lakefront access. Well, they sued to keep George Lucas off of the museum campus. And he eventually picked up and left town, never built the Lucas Museum here. Well, the Bears could potentially run into that same sort of opposition, which would, of course, complicate matters entirely. And so you'll see that part of the Bears' plan is to increase public spaces, increase landscaping, increase, park space and lakefront access in their development plan. And I think part of that is sort of the carrot that they're dangling to Friends of the Parks so that they don't necessarily run into that same buzzsaw that George Lucas did.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know all the particulars about the George Lucas Museum, but I'm still a little bit embittered that that's not in the city of Chicago, because that would be a cool thing to have in the city of Chicago.
Well, if that museum was where it was planned to be, then there would be no conversation, I'm sure, about the Bears' new stadium, because that's the location they're looking at.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That's a good point. All right, you put me back in my place. I appreciate it. We're talking to Shelby Bremer of NBC5. She's an investigative reporter, producer for NBC5 here in Chicago, giving us a little bit of our time here on the Daily Score. Obviously, as we kind of alluded to, you've got the two different entities now, whether it is the city and the Bears doing, working downtown, and then Arlington Heights. And we started to talk about them a little bit before. It sounds like the Bears, and some people aren't used to hearing this, the Bears are winning this right now. Like they are going to have two sides, I believe, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, those two sides are going to be pulling hard for the Bears. Does it feel like to you, and I know that none of us knows, that the Bears are going to, one way or the other, get what they want in terms of money, or is that completely naive to think that would happen?
I think that the public appetite for paying for these stadiums is a little different than it was in the stadium building boom of the 90s, right? And so I think that, you're going to be hard pressed to find a public that's willing to cough up, $2 billion in either location. The other element too here with the money is that in 2002, when the city renovated Soldier Field, they bonded about $400 million. Today, we owe $589 million on those $398 million of bonds. So we're still paying that off 20 years later. And that's paid through the Chicago hotel tax. So, that money could theoretically be used for something else. And so I think that a lot of, Chicago lawmakers in particular, and Chicago residents who might know about that, might be a little upset that the Bears are coming for more public money when we're still very deep in the hole on that project.
Yeah. And then there's and I don't know if how much they take into account public pressure. And obviously, when you're talking about sports, it's a different animal, because nobody's saving anybody's lives with this stuff. It's civic pride. But how much does civic pride mean when it comes to pressure in these scenarios, whether on the good side or the bad side of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a completely unquantifiable thing, right? I think if you talk to a lot of economists or sort of stadium experts, and I've spoken with a lot of people who say, from a good governance perspective, you're probably not going to get your return on that investment. If you spend $1 billion, you're probably not going to generate $1 billion in economic activity, right? But it's impossible to say what the value of a team is, because that's just like you said, civic pride. So, the economic activity projections are usually inflated, but that's something that the people in charge, the people who cut the checks, the lawmakers, the politicians need to take into account when they're making their decisions, because ultimately it's gonna stop with them, right?
Yeah. Shelby, this has been fantastic. I've loved the information. Do you know what's next in terms of any of this? I mean, maybe we just got what's next, and that was the reaction that I read to you from the Arlington Heights mayor at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the timing of, the Jerry Reinsdorf ask, I think, they're going to have to kind of work together. Now, that'll probably be a lot behind the scenes, but there is one finite pot of money that the state is maybe willing to give. And so I think both the Sox and the Bears kind of have to, compete with each other, but also negotiate and maybe give a little, because they need to come together. Lawmakers have told them to come together. And, Governor Pritzker, when this came up just a few weeks ago, said something to the effect of like, I need the proof that this is going to be a good return on the investment, and they haven't shown me that. So I think the next step for both teams is to kind of make that case both to the public and to lawmakers in Springfield. So we'll see what happens.
And as of right now, Shelby, those to the White Sox and the Bears, they're not really working together in any way, shape, or form. It feels like the Bears have just like gotten in their own vehicle and going their own way. Is that accurate at this moment?
Yeah, I think this announcement today, this $2 billion plan, staying on the lakefront, that's a Bears only venture, right? They're not doing that in concert with anybody else. So, right. But they're going to have to come together with the Sox, if they're going to get anything out of Springfield, I think.
Yeah. Awesome, Shelby. Thank you so much. People, you guys should follow Shelby's work, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube right now. Well, congratulations on having your own first and last name for Twitter. No funny things. It's just at Shelby Bremer. Very easy. Congratulations on that. Not everybody gets that.
Thank you. That means that I have been on Twitter way too long.
Yeah, that's true. You were on from the early days. That's what it is. Yeah. Yep. I came close. I got at Mark Grote Sports, which, is kind of nifty too. I'll take it.
To the point.
Yeah, to the point.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Shelby. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep, that is, again, Shelby Bremer from NBC5, investigative reporter and producer, and she is on top of the story. I'm sure that will not be the last time that we speak to her on this podcast here at the Daily Score. Thanks to everybody for listening today. For our executive producer, Ray Diaz, I am Mark Grote. Have a great rest of your day.